One of the symptoms that is normalized in our culture is PMS. PMS is actually your body's way of trying to communicate with areas where it needs a little additional love and support. Sounds like a very different way of looking at PMS, doesn't it? Join me this week as we take a look at PMS, what it's trying to tell you, the fact that it's not normal, and what you can do about it.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an Eastern medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your menstrual health, offering period solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show.
Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about one of everyone's favorite topics, which is PMS. Yes, I know, I'm trying to be funny here. Nobody enjoys PMS, but I really wanted to create a different lens for how you look at PMS and your experience with PMS. Because we live in a cultural container, and I know I use that phrase a lot, but really a lot of our body issues boil down to the fact that we have created certain social constructs that tell us different things about our body and normalize certain things around our body, and they aren't serving us. And so it's part of the reason why this program is called Reproductive Rebel, because I am pushing against those cultural structures that tell us that certain things are normal, or they try to normalize certain experiences that women collectively have, and PMS is one of them. So premenstrual syndrome can look a lot of different ways for different people, and when it is severe enough, it is escalated to premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMD, which takes the irritability and frustration to a whole new level of rage and anger that can get incredibly scary for people. So let's look at PMS. All right. PMS is something that we normalize in our culture, but isn't normal. It's actually your body trying to communicate with you that it needs certain things that it's not getting or not getting enough of. I really feel like that completely flips the frame, because a lot of times when I start working with clients, they are like, "Oh, Adrienne, I just have horrible PMS. I am a moody monster," or they describe themselves as a fire-breathing dragon, or I just want to walk away from everything because everyone is pissing me off, right? So these are really debilitating experiences. We have difficulty with interpersonal relationships. We have a hard time doing our work. We have a hard time functioning. And for some of us, we just straight up don't want to be in the same body with that experience. We even irritate ourselves. Does any of that land with you? You're not alone in that experience. And I'm hoping that this episode helps to shift how you look at your body and how you communicate with your body. Because, like, I just think about when I was a young woman, there was this Midol commercial, and I'm probably massively dating myself. Some of you might remember this commercial, but there was this Midol commercial, and the voiceover was talking about the fact that your period was coming, and you're bloated, and this woman is sitting on the couch and she's trying to force the button on her pants closed, and you're bloated and you're uncomfortable and you're moody, take Midol, it'll fix everything. I think I had just barely started my period. I don't even think I had been menstruating a year when I very vividly, even now, many years later, I still vividly remember that commercial. And I'm ashamed to admit it, but the very first thing that I did when I started having discomfort with my period because I have endometriosis is I went right out and I bought the Midol. So from a marketing standpoint, it totally freaking worked. And they got what they wanted. But now that I look at it at this stage of my life, it just makes me straight up angry that creating that kind of a conversation normalizes period cramps, bloating, and PMS as something that every woman experiences, and here is your magic pill to deal with it. And that simply isn't true. Being a woman and having PMS do not need to be synonymous things, even though we normalize it and we talk about it that way in our culture. PMS is your body's way of trying to communicate with you and saying, hey, I need something. I need a list of things. All right. And one of the cool things about Chinese medicine, my money is always on the 7,000-year-old medicine, right? Western medicine is only about 200 years old. It's a baby by comparison. And if I'm having an ectopic pregnancy, I absolutely want the 200-year-old medicine to surgically save my life, right? But for the vast majority of our day-to-day stuff, the allopathic model doesn't really offer us explanation or solutions outside of here is a pill or hormones, or we could do surgery. And even surgeries don't solve things, like if we're thinking about it from a hysterectomy perspective. So you're still going to end up with those same emotional symptoms. You'll actually end up with more emotional symptoms because it's going to disrupt your hypothalamus pituitary ovarian axis communications. Let's look at PMS through a different lens. I'm going to invite you to make friends with your PMS. And I know some of you are probably scoffing and rolling your eyes and getting ready to turn off this episode, but bear with me. Your PMS, the symptoms that you're experiencing with your PMS is one of the ways that your body is trying to tell you something about the internal landscape of your body. So if you are really irritable and every little thing irritates you, you feel like you're biting everyone's head off. I have some clients that come to me and go, please save my marriage because my spouse knows exactly when I'm getting ready to have my period even when I don't, because I don't notice that I get really short with everybody, but they do. And they go, "Oh, it's that time." That kind of irritability often comes from stagnation or heat or a combination of the two in the system. And so, if you remember from one of the previous episodes where we were talking about infection, if you haven't listened to that episode, I would highly recommend checking it out. But the episode on infections, I explained this idea of heat, that if there's not enough coolant in the car, the indicator light comes on, and with heat comes certain types of symptoms. Now, in that episode, we were talking about those symptoms being infection related. But for the purposes of this conversation, think about the hottest day in the summertime. People are straight up rude on the road. They're so rude. And no courtesy, no patience, no nothing. That old saying, hot under the collar, is really true. Okay, so now let's apply that to menstruation. If there is a heat situation, or like being in a traffic jam, a stagnation situation, everything slows down. It could be both, but it could be one or the other. One of those 2 or both of those things are happening in the system at the same time. There might be a little bit of deficient heat. It could be that your circulation is getting really hung up and slowed down, and it's creating the perfect storm for irritability and irritation to abound. So, little things like learning how to work with your cycle, meaning planning your workflow, providing your body with the tools that it needs during each of the phases of your cycle. So, yes, this does require some body literacy, We do cover it at a high level in the early episodes, episode 3 through 7 this season. If you haven't listened to those, I would highly suggest it. But I also have several programs, Body Wisdom and an upcoming one specifically geared for work that go into this very topic. So being able to plan your life with the phases of your cycle means that you're not depleting yourself of resources so that by the time you end up getting to that 5 to 7 days before your period starts, you don't feel like you're going to bite everyone's head off. And a big part of that is moving circulation. So this is not exercising to an extreme, but making sure that you're getting daily movement and every day. That will help those symptoms. When you want to just cry at everything, that indicates a deficiency in your system. Your body is subconsciously grieving the fact that it doesn't have enough of the right tools to do the job the best way possible. And so when that happens, we look at the body and go, okay, here are the resources that the body needs in order to refill the cup. And that crying factor tends to go away. Worry, anxiety, irritation, anger, bloating, all of these things speak to different aspects of your system requiring a little extra love and support. A big foundational concept under all of this is movement. So, being able to move appropriately through your whole cycle, we as a whole tend to be a very sedentary culture. And so, all of the sitting that we're doing and the lack of moving that we're doing does catch up with us. And it shows up in bold capital flashing letters by the time we get to PMS or the PMS stage, right? That week prior to your period starting. Other kinds of symptoms that are very common is breast tenderness. So, the bloating and the breast tenderness are a sign of stagnation. So, you know how I was talking about that traffic jam in the road? Irritability can come from that, bloating can come from that, breast tenderness can come from that. Maybe not tender breasts, but the swollen, heavy breasts, all of those sensations and feelings in the body come from there being a lack of proper flow of fluids happening in the system. A lot of times, people who experience those symptoms also will have it show up and essentially confirm that's the case in the way that the period looks. The color of the blood, the clots, the clot size, the pain, the quality of the pain, all of those kinds of things oftentimes correlate very neatly with the symptoms that people see during the period that they refer to as their PMS period. The crying and the worrying, the blood is looking for certain things and the spleen energy is looking for certain things. So if we are able to give our body the things that it needs physically. So I know I've talked about this a little bit before, but PMS doesn't have to be an experience, and a lot of it has to do with how we care for ourselves all month long. Learning your body, learning the phases of your cycle, learning what each of those phases needs for nutrition, for movement, for I'm going to call it energetic practices, but really this like kind of boils down to stress management. So PMS gets worse with stress. We are in a culture where we are expected to live in spring and summer energy all the time. Go, be productive, create the thing. All of those kinds of expectations are of high value in our culture. And our modern world moves faster than it's ever moved before. And our nervous system really isn't designed to keep up with it. And we need to give ourselves more periods of rest. Okay. So, with that understanding, menstruation invites us to rest. And then during the rest of the month, we have to be mindful about how we move through the month in order to decrease symptoms at the end of our menstrual month, where we tend to be more symptomatic. So, supporting your energy and supporting the way that your body is showing up after menstruation during the middle of the month capitalizing on the gifts that our cycle gives us in terms of planning characteristics and energy and focus and all of those kinds of things, by the time we get to that week out before our period arrives again, we have laid a good solid foundation so that when we get to that mark in the cycle, which oftentimes comes right around cycle day 21, we are able to put into practice the kinds of eating, movement, and behavioral practices that are going to minimize our experience with PMS. I've had people come to me for PMS alone. They weren't even worried about their cycle. They were like, literally, my behavior is so Jekyll and Hyde between before I get to that week before my period and then starting cycle day 21 to 23, somewhere in there, I turn into a completely different person and my spouse is threatening to leave. I'm not even exaggerating. I have had people come to me and be like, please save my marriage because this period of my entire month is so disruptive for my relationships. And it's really incredible how just changing the way that we make decisions throughout our whole month and the things that we do for our bodies can make a change in that experience. When people work with me, they are also incorporating diet, herbs, and pelvic steaming. Pelvic steaming is incredibly effective for decreasing people's experience with PMS. I am a huge advocate. So if you are someone who is struggling with PMS symptoms, get with a certified practitioner and learn how something as simple as sitting over herbs and steam can really change your experience with that. There's a reason why steam works as well as it does. And I know I've talked about it in previous episodes, but you have acupuncture points where the sun doesn't shine that are incredibly powerful for regulation of the entire system. And one of those acupuncture points is connected to the interstate highway. Okay, that's what I'm going to call the meridian because it visually makes it easier to understand. The interstate highway that runs up the midline of your body. And when there are traffic accidents on that interstate highway, things get slowed down. They could be fluid or substance being stuck, or it could be energy being stuck, or it could be both. That's why I said, like, your period symptoms, your PMS symptoms could be coming from one or the other. Because our world is so busy and moving so fast, it's not uncommon for both to happen because we tend to just live on this hamster wheel. And I know I'm belaboring that point, but the reason am so hyper focused on the hamster wheel aspect of things is PMS is inviting us not only to look at our body in a different way, but it is inviting us to move through the world in a different way. A way where we realize that we are a cycling body, and instead of just dreading the onset of our period every month and trying to suppress its expression in every way possible, from birth control to other kinds of medication, we can actually improve the expression of this and create a relationship with our period where we realize, okay, so this is just a biological process that is going to happen for me, whether I enjoy it or not. So let's try to support ourselves in the ways that we can so that this isn't as much of an issue. It changes the frame. Our body doesn't have to be our enemy. And a lot of times, as bleeding bodies, we make our body the enemy. We have memes for days that tell us our period is supposed to hurt, our period is a mess, our periods part of being a woman is having a shitty experience with our menstrual cycle, and that it just is. In order to be a woman, like I said at the beginning, it's synonymous. To be a bleeding body or to be an expression of female identity, you automatically have to have a crappy period. That's not the case. It is totally possible to have a 28 to 30 day symptom free cycle 4 to 6 days of bleed. It's done. You're supporting yourself well throughout the month. And, it totally makes my day when I'm working with my clients and they get to that moment where the work that they've been doing to change their lifestyle and their relationship with their entire menstrual cycle comes to fruition with the statement, I didn't even know my period was coming this month, and there it was. I have heard that so many times, and I can't help but grin from ear to ear every single time I hear it because they have reached that moment where they have achieved an understanding and the ability to have a cycle that doesn't lay them out before the bleed even begins. That isn't the way that it's supposed to be. If we are supporting our body in the way that we should, it just arrives. And some of my clients are almost like, I don't even know what to do with this because I'm so used to knowing my period is going to come because I'm getting cramping beforehand or I'm a moody monster for 3 days or whatever it is. And this time it just snuck up on me and I lost track of the days and I woke up with blood and went, oh, but that's a good thing, not the mess part, but you know what I'm saying. Like the fact that they didn't want to burn the village down and they didn't have a ton of cramping and they didn't have tender breasts and they didn't have the bloating. They literally had none of these signals that our culture normalizes before the period started. And then it just appeared. And a lot of times when that starts to happen, you also are less symptomatic once the bleed begins as well. So PMS tells us a story. It tells us we need more yellow and orange vegetables if we are crying a lot. It is telling us that we need to be more mindful with our movement. If you tend to be somebody with sharp, stabby pain, the intensity of your workouts can be a little bit higher in those 5 days before your period begins. But be mindful that in that 5 to 7 day window, you are more susceptible to injury. So, intensity is okay, but you're going to have to be cautious with how you're doing it so that you don't injure yourself. But making sure to prioritize movement, even just that one thing. And when I say movement, I'm not talking about going to the gym like 5 days a week, doing kickboxing for an hour at a time. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. Some bodies are stagnant enough. That level of cardio could be helpful, but that's not what it needs to be. This could be as simple as prioritizing going for a walk on your lunch break every day during the week and making sure that you're prioritizing some level of a walk on the weekend. Like, it could be that easy because we sit a lot. We have a lot of jobs that make us sit a lot. There are people who have very active lives that do have these kinds of symptoms too. And usually that's happening because they don't have enough of something. So, this is why it's important to talk to a certified practitioner to be able to figure out like which combination of things is fueling the symptoms that you're experiencing. But the gem that I want you to take out of this episode is that PMS doesn't have to be your experience. There are natural ways of reducing PMS symptoms, and that PMS is a communication tool that your body is using to tell you which areas you need more love and support. Okay, so let's start to change the conversation around PMS and look at it as, oh, I'll give you a great example. So I gave a presentation at a business networking group a bunch of years ago now, and it used to majorly irritate me to give a presentation to a mixed group. Okay, so cis men, women, that type of thing. Because inevitably, there was a husband in the room that would make some tongue in cheek comment about, can you fix PMS? And it used to really bother me because I felt like it reinforced this construct, right? And then I realized one day that I could change the conversation around it. And so ended up giving this presentation. Inevitably, there was that gentleman in the room that uncomfortably looked around at the other people in the room because for some reason it's really uncomfortable to talk about periods in our culture also, even though they're as normal as breathing. And this guy goes, "Oh, do you fix PMS?" And I looked at him and I was just like, I said, "It sounds like your wife's body is asking for help and that there's an imbalance going on in her system." I said, "Yes, I can fix PMS because I'm sure it doesn't feel good to her either." And then I looked at the rest of the room and I said, "You are either someone who has a cycle or you love someone who has a cycle." And it's really important to understand that PMS is a cry for help and not just something that people enjoy doing at the end of the month. It is a cry for help, and the body is asking for love and support. And that was like the end of what I had to say. And the gentleman's face completely changed. He went from, I'm going to make a tongue in cheek joke and express my discomfort with this topic by poking fun at a cultural norm. And I flipped the conversation and I realized in that moment just how powerful that is to be able to flip the frame and be like, no, this isn't just a normal thing. This is actually a sign of an imbalance and the body needs help. Because his face softened and I saw him mouth the word, "Oh." And he didn't say anything else in the context of that. But I did get a message later. He picked up my business card, which I didn't realize at the time, and he had given it to his wife. And his wife did come to see me. Regardless of how you orient yourself, who it is that you choose to love, you either love someone who is a cycling body or you yourself are a cycling body. And if we start changing this conversation, that PMS is just this thing to be dreaded, it's an inevitable thing, it's just part of being a bleeding body, and we start looking at it differently, we're able to support ourselves in meaningful ways. We're able to get the help that we need because those types of symptoms are not normal, even though we normalize them. And we can really make a profound change in our internal relationship with self because now we're no longer talking shit to ourselves inside our head. And that inner critic is a jerk. That inner critic can be really loud and tell us that we're not doing enough and that we're a monster every month. I've had women describe themselves that way. I turn into a monster every month. And we don't even think about like how those kinds of descriptive words make people feel on the inside. There's a lot of shame around PMS. There's a lot of shame. And there isn't anything to be ashamed of. I'm going to say that again. There is a lot of shame around PMS, and yet there is nothing to be ashamed of. It's simply your body looking for more support in certain areas, and it is doing the best that it can to communicate what it is that it needs. My whole goal with Reproductive Rebel and all of the courses that I offer in the Tao of Women Institute, the info sessions that I do, everything, my whole mission is to teach people how to look at their bodies through a different lens so that you can start to see the symptoms that everyone dreads and laments and talks crap about is actually your body's way of trying to lovingly communicate with you and say, hey, I need a little bit more love and support in this particular area. Can you help me out? We do not have to live with PMS or PMDD. I've worked with that too, but for the scope of this show, I want you to know that PMS does not have to be your experience. There are ways to improve your experience, and I'm here to help you every step of the way.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist, herbalist, sound healer, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment with Adrienne for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter to get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like us and follow Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.